Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Oscar Hernandez, board-certified internist and practicing pediatrician. Today I'm going to do something that I don't think we've ever done on these short videos that I do. I'm going to rag on the press. Yep, I'm going to do it, folks. And the reason I'm going to do this is because as I was preparing for something I have to do at a local school, a local presentation, review of their safety measures and so on, I was doing some research, and one of my favorite places to go is the Florida Department of Health and the CDC's specific site, which is coronavirus.gov, for this particular epidemic. And I was rummaging through the Florida Department of Health website, and I found some data yesterday that really shook me a bit in my boots about how the press conveys this epidemic and what some of the reality numbers are. Now, this ties into our previous program that had to do with reopening, where I reflected it a little bit about the importance that we have to at some point carry on with our lives. And one of the central themes in my mind is that the virus isn't going away. So you say, well, we have to wait another month or 2 months or 3 months or however long it is that we're supposed to wait for this virus to go away so that it is airtight, locked down, safe, and nobody will ever be affected by the virus. That's not going to happen. We mentioned this on the last video. So we have to learn how to proceed as cautiously as we can without falling prey to another illness called starvation and poverty, because that one also takes a high toll. Don't believe me? Go look at third world countries and underdeveloped places and places whose economies are wrecked and see what their standard of life is, see what their standard of health is, see what their levels of death rate are, and it doesn't look pretty. So let's rag a little bit on the press today. Recently, there was an article. Well, on March 24th, everything here is recent because everything keeps changing, in the Tampa Bay Times. And it says this. This is March 24th, Tampa Bay Times. In Florida, the model predicts 465,699 people will be hospitalized because of COVID-19. The illness caused by complications from the virus by April 24th, but there will only be 36,384 hospital beds available by that date. No doubt they interviewed some person who was very knowledgeable about infectious diseases and some expert, maybe at some university. I haven't read the article, but here's the reality of the numbers according to the Florida Department of Health. There were supposed to be, as I just mentioned, according to this article, over 465,000 hospitalizations. The truth is that on April 24th, a month after that article, remember this was going to be a projection into the future, you know how many people there were in the hospital with COVID-19? 2,100 people. There's an amazing discrepancy between almost 500,000 people and 2,100 people. Folks, you can look at the graph yourself. We're putting it on the screen. It comes from the Florida Department of Health. This isn't just some imaginary graph that I looked at. Let's go to the second article. This is April 6th of 2020, of course, the year of the pandemic. This is the Orlando Sentinel. And the headline reads, projections say the state could run out of ICU beds by April 14th. Another person, which I am sure was very knowledgeable, and some organization or foundation made this projection, and so on and so on. And the worry machine has to start. Here's the fact. At that time, the ICU bed availability in the state of Florida was 36%. That means that we had approximately 64% of the ICU beds in use, but 34% were still free and available. Well, that's very different than that headline. Let's look at another one. This is April 3rd. This is from Tampa Bay, Spectrum News, Channel 9. Here's what their worry was about, and you, for sure, if anybody out there in the listening audience has had their ear to the news, you've heard this one before 20 million times. Here's their headline. When no more ventilators are left. As political and health leaders look into the face of rapidly approaching peaks in COVID-19 cases, the need for ventilators has hit crisis levels. This is their newscaster. There will likely come a point when there will be no more ventilators to shuttle around. And when that happens, what next? Let's look at the data. Fact: Florida has never had a shortage of ventilators. And at the time that this was accessed, which was May 15, the Department of Health site says, we currently have 74.6% ventilator availability. That means that only about 25% of the ventilators in the state are actually being used. And it is accompanied by a graph that, again, we will place on screen. All of this is from the Florida Department of Health, and it shows that there were 6,347 ventilators available for use, and only 378 of those were in use at the time that this slide was made. Here's my concern. If you listen to the press, we're in the midst of this partial phased-in reopening in the middle of expanding and catastrophically growing numbers of cases and deaths from COVID-19. If that's not your impression, then you are either not listening to the news or you're listening to the right news, because that is an incorrect impression. So here's what the Florida State Department of Health says. This is data that I accessed on May 15. Here's what it shows. It shows that in Florida, the hospitalizations per 100,000 people is one of the lowest of all the states that are significantly affected by COVID-19. In fact, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Illinois, Louisiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania are all states that are higher in terms of its COVID hospitalizations. There are currently in the state of Florida 9.8 per 100,000 people hospitalized with COVID-19. Well, we wish it were zero. When you look at New Jersey, it's 72 per 100,000 people. When you look at New York, it's 65 per 100,000 people. At Massachusetts, 56 per 100,000 people. At Connecticut, 48 per 100,000 people. 37 per 100,000 people for Illinois. Louisiana, 35.8%. Michigan, 26.3%. Pennsylvania, 21.7%. By the way, I would urge our listeners to ask themselves what party the governor for each of these states belongs to. That would be an interesting study. Here are the number of COVID ICU bed occupancies per 100,000 people according to state. Guess what? Of the 6 states listed, Florida has the least number at 2.8 people per 100,000 in the population that are in an ICU bed for COVID-19. Oh, by the way, New York is 25.8 per 100,000, New Jersey 20.4, Massachusetts 14.6, Illinois 10.3, and Michigan 9.8. So if in the state of Florida you're hearing how terrible we're doing, you probably want to look at the data yourselves. Check out the Florida Department of Health. If you look at our new case trend positivity, and again we're going to show this graph on the screen there, you'll see that there is a significant decline in cases in the state of Florida since March 30. The idea that our cases are going up, if for some reason you have that impression, is totally incorrect. So the point is this: we want to make sure that you are well informed. We want to make sure that you do not fall prey to the images or the information that is conveyed in some of the public media. It is very, very sad that some of our media is in such a state of hype over this. I want you guys to know the real numbers. That's why we've done this particular program. And I want you to also understand that sometimes the headlines use terms like mysterious and unknown. And we're going to do a segment about Kawasaki type illness in children who have COVID-19, and actually it's appearing in a lot of kids who don't have COVID-19, or at least by our ability to test them. We're going to talk about that in a separate program. But the reason I mention that particular issue is because some of the headlines that have to do with that particular presentation in children use the word mysterious, unknown. They mystify this stuff, when in fact this type of illness, which is also presented under a different name, Kawasaki Syndrome, has been known since 1967. Tamakazu Kawasaki described this back in '67 in Japan. When I was a resident at Michigan State University, we were seeing these children as well, and we see 4,000 to 5,000 cases a year in the United States. Now, we've had a blip in terms of numbers of cases and hotspots where we see COVID. We don't know what that association is. Anyway, watch the program about Kawasaki disease in children. I'm going to do a little segment that has to do with that and the rate of infectivity of children who do get COVID-19, because that's important when it comes to our school openings, and believe me, those are coming, and we have to see what that looks like in the future. Well, it's a short video today, but I wanted to leave you with some of these thoughts. Think for yourself, and don't listen to everything you hear. If you want the data, go to coronavirus.gov, go to the Florida Department of Health, and that's where some of the real numbers are. Remember, if you like the program, give us a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe so that you get these programs. I just want to leave you with this particular message so that it's in your mind and you don't forget it and I don't mix it up with a bunch of other stuff. Remember something else. If you have a small business, if you're the owner of a small or medium-sized business, if you're the leader of a civic organization, a faith-based organization, don't forget that you may need professional guidance as we continue to open up our business settings and our economies as to what you should properly do to protect your staff and your employees. If you need that type of help, we are here. Go to our website, coronavirusbusinessadvisorsandconsultants.com, coronavirusbusinessadvisorsandconsultants.com. You can also find it under the initials cvbac.com. And we want to make sure that you have the proper training of your staff. You understand disinfection procedures. If your staff needs testing, we're going to help you with that. We do it all under the same price. Not everybody is going to want testing. But listen, if you need us, we're going to be there. By the way, I'm going to prepare you for something that I am sure, I pray, will happen in the future. And that's that we're going to have a vaccine. The American Medical Association sends physicians like myself a little email every morning called AMA Morning Rounds. They had recently in AMA Morning Rounds a report from Reuters that said that only about 75% of the population would get a COVID-19, a coronavirus vaccination if one were available. Let me start preparing your minds. When that vaccine becomes available, and it will become available, we need at least 80 to 90% of our population to be immune in order to help those who don't want to be immunized. Some people will not be able to take the vaccine. They may not have access to it. They may have contraindications. They may have simply the lack of means to get it because of expenses. They may have problems because they think that vaccines are just a bad idea, and like that, perhaps 25% of the population, they just don't want it. Not everybody's going to get the vaccine, not to mention the fact that we'd need 300 million doses of the vaccine tout sweet so that we could vaccinate everybody. A vaccination campaign against COVID-19 will probably last many months, if not a few years, in this country. And that is assuming that the virus doesn't mutate every so often and we need a vaccine. But let me prepare you mentally for the fact that when this vaccine comes, unless you have an absolute contraindication, open your minds and get the vaccine, because it's going to be probably the best way that we have to have some sense of normality in our lives and still be protected against COVID-19. All right, remember, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. If you need help with your business, Coronavirus Business Advisors and Consultants.com, cvbac.com. We're here for you 24 hours a day. If you don't have a physician, we are accepting your patients. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.